Hello, I am glad to see you here. I'm actually quite excited to start this video, but before we get started, I need to tell you something. This is not a tutorial. If you're looking for a house tutorial, go to some other YouTube channel. I'm trying to make videos to help you design your own builds, not copy block for block. I want to inspire you to be more artistic in what you do. I believe given enough time, practice, and patience, anyone can become good at building, or in other words, art. Obviously, watching this video will not make you a master, but it should help you understand building a lot better. So without further ado, let's get into this. So I'll be going over three main things in this video, the first of which being planning, the second being shape and detail, and the third being, I just call it freedom, but it's not really like that, not as cringy. And sorry for the little bit of a weird setup here, it's just that I'm actually trying to make this video helpful, so I want to be able to pause and point towards things so you will be able to understand it better. So right now, planning is extremely important because I want to know exactly what shape it's going to be before I start. Now, unfortunately for this video, I was going to do something like that where I could show this off in a very nice way. I had an entire thing planned out in diamond and emerald and gold. I had a really nice planning, but I accidentally started out with the shape and I didn't start with the style, and I actually learned something new while making this video, which I was actually quite happy about. So, sorry for the still screen here, but, you know, I'm trying to, yeah, you get the point. So, my mistake, which wasn't actually a mistake, it's just depending on what I was trying to do, I would do it whichever way. So, for what I'm doing right now, I already know what it's going to look like. I already know what the pillar looks like because I've built a house very similar to this before. So I already know what the roof's going to look like. I already know the general idea. So that means I don't need to plan as much because I've built something similar before. But if you're going to build something completely new, this is not how you design it, because I'm designing it with blocks where I know the color, which does not exactly help me very much. If you're going to design your own house and you want it to be completely new and you've never seen it before or anything like that, plan it using diamonds and emeralds and gold, because then you don't know the color of it, and they're nice bright blocks and they have dark edges around them, so they're easy to count. Very good way of planning. In fact, I do it a little bit later on, just not as much as I would have, and sorry about that, I can't explain it too awfully much, but still, as you can see here, I'm just doing the bog standard planning that you see most people do. You may recognize it because a lot of medieval houses use this, except for they use wooden pillars, and they do it like you know, half the size of this. This is quite a large house. But now I can actually get into the more educational part where I can explain it much better. But this also goes a little bit in with style. So this right here, I'm designing and defining the style by building one pillar. Instead of having to build an entire house to figure out what style I'm doing, I should, which this is what I'm doing right now, I should figure out what style I'm doing by one pillar, because you can figure out what style something is by just the pillar of it. So I'm using this pillar to figure out how I'm going to detail it. This is defining everything else I'm going to do later on throughout this build, which helps a lot, which I already knew quite a bit about it because I've built a house very similar to this before. But that is quite important, yeah. So I'm just going to do less about shape, less about planning, more about shape and detail, because the planning, I'll have to do a video on that later. I may actually make an entire video on that, on planning your builds and shape and detail, all three of those in a specific video just for that. But yeah, so as you can see here, I'm building one wall, well, most of one wall, so I can see what they look like lined up. So I can see, do I need any details on the sides? Do I need any details over there? Where do I want to put my details? Do I need a window here? Do I need a window there? What do I need? You know, I'm trying to figure out exactly what I'm doing. I already know, like, I have a general idea, so I don't need to plan everything out, as I said, but it's nice to sort of get an idea of what I'm doing. And especially with, like, the details and the shape of it. So with the shape I have right here, as you saw whenever I was planning it out, I want each side to be slightly different. I don't want them to be all exactly the same, because if every side is exactly the same, then there's no point in looking at the other sides. You'll just stop looking at it because you already know what every side looks like. In fact, as you can see right here, I'm doing that right now. I'm changing the shape a little bit to test out whether or not I would like this shape, because it makes it a little bit more dynamic. It makes it a lot more interesting. A good example of this is, if you look over there, there's grass block, right? you obviously know what it looks like because every grass block is identical. If I go over here, there's another grass block. It looks identical to the other one. Do I need to fly over to this grass block and this grass block to make sure that they're identical? Not really. It's exactly the same way with a house. Whenever you're building a house, if every side of the house is identical, why look at them? I mean, you might fly over it once just to check it out, see if it's a little bit different. But once you know what the other side looks like, you're not really going to check it out. You know, you might look at one side, check it out for a few minutes, and then the other sides you only look at for 5 seconds because you already know exactly what it looks like. There's no point in checking it out all over again. Unless like you're studying it, which I've done that before. I've studied builds like that and looked down for a long time, but generally you don't do that unless you're studying. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Keep your shapes a lot more dynamic. It helps a lot. That's what I was trying to do here, but I ended up actually scrapping it. And well, there you go, glitch. The server glitched out for a second there. Sure, that was actually quite annoying for me. It kicked me out, but that's fine. So with this right here, you can see that I was trying to make it more dynamic. But the thing I was trying to explain with this is the freedom part of it. And I say freedom, it sounds a bit cringy. Really, I'm just trying to say that don't be afraid to make mistakes, because I ended up hating this and I removed it. That's an entire section of a wall. I mean, even if you don't have World Edit, even if you're on Windows 10 Edition, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Testing out an idea is the best way to make sure if it will look good. And if it looks good, then great, you just made your builds just look an entire little bit better, entire 5 times better, 2 times better, 10 times better. But if I would have never done that, I would have not known if it would look better or worse. And fortunately for me, it looked worse because, yeah, I ended up deleting it later. So make sure that you test out ideas. And that's one reason why I say use diamond blocks and gold blocks, which is good and bad at the same time because the odd colors makes it a little bit difficult to see if it'll look good in what you're doing, but they're great blocks to test out whether or not something will look good. So let's say if I was going to add an entire room, I could make like a cylinder or something like that of where a room would be and see if the shape looks good that way. If the shape looks good, then I can keep it. If it doesn't, then I can remove the gold blocks. And for you Windows 10 Edition people, there is a fill command that will remove blocks, but it will only remove specific blocks using the replace thing. Many of you already know this command, so if you make an entire room out of gold, you can easily remove it right afterwards if you don't like it. So you can't say that you can't do stuff like that on Windows 10 Edition. Now I'm about to remove it, luckily. Another thing, though, about the details part of it, you do the same thing, the dynamic bit, with the details as well. You can sort of see that, the details are not all evenly spaced apart. They're a little bit in specific areas. There's a grouping of detail here, a grouping of detail there. I mean, obviously they are lined up and they are in like a systematic spot, but they are not exactly, every detail isn't exactly 2 blocks apart. I mean, this one, 1, 2, 3, that one's 4 blocks away, and then 1, 2, 3 blocks away. It has a big grouping here, and then a massive empty section here, which I don't detail that later on. I have groupings of details that are sort of in not exactly random spots, but for me strategic. They can be in random spots and it'll be perfectly fine, but also blank areas, which I'll let this play since I have time. There's also a bunch of blank areas in the build. If you detailed everything like all over the place, what this will happen is that it won't look detailed anymore because you have so many details everywhere that it just makes it look like there's no detail. So if you over detail something, it makes it look like there's less detail because the details clump together and they don't form details. They just form a general shape and it just makes it look less detailed. It makes it look like there's almost no detail at all. So you have to be careful whenever you over detail stuff, like especially with medieval stuff. That's extremely easy to do. In fact, there's a specific style where that type of detail is everywhere and it's just stairs and slabs. I mean, if you know how to do it correctly, it can look pretty cool, but if you don't, you may end up accidentally messing up your build. I mean, just practice it, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Just be careful with it and know what you're doing and know the risk of accidentally messing it up. I would recommend leaving entire sections of walls blank. In fact, some of my favorite builds I've ever seen have entire pillars and walls completely empty, and it's a little bit irritating in my opinion, but it works perfectly fine. And it's sort of the same way what I'm doing here, and I want to explain a few more things, but yeah. So sort of like there's empty section here and there and there, and here, which I'm going to be changing up some of this in a second, as you can see. And now I'm going to switch back to shape. So we'll let that detail part ruminate, where you add details and don't, and that kind of stuff. And I won't go back to shape. So right now I'm changing up the shape of the build because I don't feel like the shape is dynamic enough, and I want each side to be just a little bit different. You know, that's one reason why I added that thing over there, the fireplace, the furnace thing, whatever it's called, chimney. Yeah, there we go. It's called a chimney. That's one reason why I added that chimney over there, was so that I could add a bit of shape to the build without actually having to add shape. Same reason why I add this, and I'm actually about to add a bit of a cylinder over here in a second. And I knew that was going to look good, so I didn't plan it out, unfortunately. But yeah, so as you can see with this right here, this shape is going to make the whole entire build a lot more dynamic. It's not going to make every side the same. So if I was going to look at this build, you know, you would look at the sides, see, wow, that's actually pretty cool. You have a staircase there, and then when you go over this side, there's going to be, you know, a cylinder in a second. So you can see me planning out a few stuff with diamonds. As you can see now, you're like, oh wow, there's this entire little section popping out. That's really neat. You know, you're detailing and adding interest using entire rooms. You have to be aware that sometimes an entire room can be a small detail, or in some cases a big detail. And sometimes small details are also very important, such as this section right here. I don't know why I added that zoom in, but yeah. And also like texturing as well, the randomized look of it. I mean, if there's a pattern to the textures, you know, it's just gonna look structured, which is good for some builds, but not good in other builds. That's the same way with like the way the rooms are formed as well, the shapes. Because the shapes are details, because this is a shape, right? That's a shape. That's a shape. Oh, that's another shape. So the way you texture something is sort of, well, actually it's very similar to how you design entire rooms, making the shape dynamic and everything like that. So as you can see right now, I'm sort of like adding this detail here. There we go. Added a little bit of detail to make every side just a little bit different, because these were windows. And I see a lot of people make this mistake, but a lot of people build like these houses and skyscrapers, which, you know, skyscrapers I can understand, but I mean a lot of houses where every wall has a window. It's like, why do you need so many windows? I mean, that's like a fishbowl. I would not want to live there. I mean, anyone could spy on you from anywhere. There's just windows everywhere. That just does not make sense to me. I mean, for a skyscraper, it makes sense because, you know, real life skyscrapers have windows everywhere. So, I mean, that's understandable. But in a lot of these builds, I would recommend making a few walls have blank space, such as this. There's blank spaces, and I did add a little bit of detail to make up for the fact that there's no window in there anymore. And this really does help to make every side a little bit different. It adds interest to the build without having to do as much. And especially on Windows 10 Edition, you know, you wouldn't have built that window there. It saves a little bit of time. It makes it more interesting. It changes the way it looks. It helps out quite a bit. I mean, don't do it every time. It just depends on what you're looking for, whether or not you should or shouldn't do that. And as you can see here, I'm adding some more shape to it. I'm trying to figure out how can I add an interesting shape to the build without actually adding a shape. And I think I accidentally skipped ahead a few, like 30 seconds, so that's fine. Same with this right here, I'm trying to add a little shape to it. To the bottom bit, you know, just have a simple window, and I did that same pattern. I probably should have changed up the pattern a little bit, but yeah, I don't know what I was thinking with that, having it the exact same pattern. It doesn't exactly matter too much. But yeah, and obviously I can just leave that side blank if I wanted to. Though I did actually add that detail later on. Don't know why though. But just keep in mind that you need to make your details in certain spots. So you shouldn't have details everywhere, but you shouldn't have them nowhere. You have to have them in like systematic locations or random locations or you have to know what you're trying to get out of your build. Sort of like, let me try to find an example here. Sort of like if I wanted this build to look a bit more structural. Here, let me go here. There's a good spot. So many times you've seen Baroque buildings, or like the White House, where this side's identical to the other side. That is very good if you're going for a very structural feel, where it's very structured. It's all straight lines. They're lined up. It's very dominating. You're wanting to, like the White House, you want it to feel very structured and controlling, or maybe not controlling, but controlled. And that is very good for a lot of really big structured buildings. And this has that sort of feel to it. There's a symmetry to it that you can see. This side's the same as that side, and every pillar's the same. There's a structure, there's a systematic detail to it. But then there's also random texturing here, and I probably should have textured the wood a little bit, but I'll probably do that later. And there's a lot, especially right here, you can see that there's entire sections of the wall that come out that are different from the other sides. There's an entire little mini tower over there. It's structured and it's systematic, but there's also some random details that don't make a lot of sense. So you can mix it up a little bit. Shape is a detail. So just keep that in mind, that what the shape of your building details the building as well. That depicts a lot of details. That's one reason why sometimes diagonal buildings do look really nice, even though there's hardly any detail involved, is because you detailed it with the shape. And you don't have to use as much detail because you don't need it, because you have already detailed it with the shape. So you don't need as much because it's already there. Well, you know what I mean. You end up accidentally over detailing if you try to detail it anymore. But just sort of keep that in mind, and that will help you out a lot. So I'm hoping this will help you, and if it did help you, definitely comment down below, because these videos are not exactly easy to make. I mean, I messed up like twice building this thing, and I had to restart like twice. It was a bit painful, but I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, definitely share it with other people, especially if you found it helpful. Like, I really do want to share videos that are helpful to you and other people. And if you feel the same way about making videos that inspire you and other people to be more artistic in what they do, and then definitely share it. And thank you if you do, and if you don't, that's perfectly fine. I hope you have a great, wonderful, fantastic, sublime day, and God bless.